Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I got a little bit more to get to about Google ads thing. Well, I'll just say something briefly in the beginning here, and a little bit more on Bobby Kennedy, Robert Kennedy Jr. Just a few comments I wanted to address. What you're looking at is a picture of bone sauce. It is something that was, I don't know if it was invented by this guy, Sepp Holzer, but he was one of the original permaculture people. The first video I saw about this was years ago, and it's a very foul-smelling substance that you create by basically getting the juice out of bones through starting a fire with two cast iron pots and burying them and all this stuff. And it's when it's applied to trees, especially fruit trees, it keeps deer from eating the bark and even the leaves and things like this. Very effective. My wife and I have used it before. This is the first time making it. So that's what we did on the 4th of July, and I was happy. It came out successful. It's a little bit complex, and it was so hot. So that was... anyways, so a bunch of stuff to get to in terms of headlines I haven't covered. And there is an epic interview with Peter Hotez on MSNBC, which I found out about yesterday, and I want to watch the whole thing. And just from the beginning of it, it just needs to be. It's like so funny and so embarrassing for MSNBC. And so to start off with, I made this video on Google yesterday, and I had a tape record or recorded conversation with the employee, which I, would normally, like I don't believe in just recording somebody or whatever, but they record me every time. They ask my permission to record me for their quality, whatever it is. So every time I have a conversation with Google, they record me, and they can, go back and listen to it or whatever it is. But it's just how inefficient they are. Part of it is they're very prejudicial against people in the truth community, but it's just not us. It's people who buy ad time with them. And it's also, their whole reliant on machine learning, as they call it, instead of people. Because running ads for me, if you guys listen to the tape, I have a tape of the guy admitting that they can't, I have all this data from you guys of YouTube channels that would be preferable for me to run ads on, because the people watching those channels are much more likely to end up liking my channel. Like it's it's a very high rate of crossover. People who watch my channels also watch these channels. So it's a no-brainer, right? Instead of these vast amount of YouTube channels that have sheeple on it, or people who just aren't like us or like me or whatever. And so their inability to change, set, and pivot and do what their customer, the guy who's paying them, which is me in this case, and go through some convoluted way of gathering information and, probably never coming up with the same results of where they're going to place my ads. They're just stealing my money on their incompetence and worshiping their AI beasts. And it's not just that their AI beasts are sucky. It's that because they've prejudiced their system, because it would be very easy with all the information they have available, they would look at what you guys who watch my channel, because I'm advertising, because they're so compartmentalized and there's no, shared, whatever between Google ads and YouTube itself. And YouTube is compartmentalized in terms of their ads versus their community guidelines team versus, and they're using cheap labor from foreign countries, and, when they're not using bots, instead of just making things work in a way that would be, in a comprehensive way. Like if they worked towards, if the goal of me paying them to, I'm paying them as a customer to basically make my channel available so I can get more subscribers and more viewers. which their algorithms are working against because of the truther thing, but they're also working against everyone else in some way or another. And they're favoring CNN and MSNBC for no apparent reason, right? Which is stupid. It's a bad business plan. It's a bad social plan because it, creates like disharmony between people in the beastly system. And because of that, because they won't acknowledge truthers as a demographic, but it's not just that. It's not like just an anti-truther thing. They won't find their algorithms, their computer learning, their machine learning won't ever come up with the right answer because it'd be so easy for them to look at my viewers and create a profile of my viewers, all of you, because they can do that. They have all this data and all this high-powered, AI and, the level of computer data they can collect and manipulate. And, I told that story where they seem to either read my mind or just figure out that I would need polyurethane, which was, where they came up with that answer, what they weren't spying on me. But just, with all the data they could collect, they would figure out the kinds of channels and the literal channels you guys all watch. And they would take my audience's preference and say, this is his audience. This is what his audience likes. It would be so easy. Let's run ads here. But they won't do that. And that's like the inefficiency and the complete breakdown of the system. And it's like they're worshiping the oracle, like they're slaves to their AI technology and their algorithms and things. But they've gamed the system, and their company can't survive this, right? They won't be able to get advertised revenue, right? It's just frustrating to use, and I'm sure pretty much everyone uses it, has these frustrations with the lack of results. So by doing this, I didn't get the results I want, which is, that, and it's a dying system. Like I'm going to have to do something at some point. Like, I don't know what it is. It's not right now, so I don't, but it's, it's just going in a way that's unsustainable for me on a financial level. And then, and just, it sucks so bad to be a part of something that sucks so bad, a complete failure. And that's the whole system. That's the do with the RFK as well. Because people have switched and they don't believe in the mainstream crap anymore. They don't. They're not looking at the news. They're not watching the news. Young people are, will never watch the news. They'll never look at that as a way to gather information. It's foreign. It's like something that, doesn't exist in their reality as something they would do. Even my generation, I'm almost turning 60. Now, I grew up with 3 channels, but, the boomers, they grew up with nightly news, and the news was a big thing. But now, like I'm going to show you with the MSNBC thing, it's pathetic what they're doing. It's how, desperate they are and how weak and impotent they are. And they've lost control in a way, like I'm seeing it now, that is like freaking them the F out. Like they have no way to rein people back in. They could turn off the internet, but they're also using the internet to control people and keep people pacified. And so they're so screwed. People have a different level of consciousness. There's a spiritual awakening going on. There's like 2 things going on. There's idiocracy, which is widespread, like the dumbing down of people. They're just like a lot of stupidity. My wife and I were watching some like cheesy reality TV shows that would reckon, just they were on Hulu. Things we watched to make fun of. And one of them was a Lifetime show, and they had these couples get married at first sight. And another one was these people we only watched like a couple episodes of this because it was so bad. Both of them were bad in different ways, but they were entertaining. We were like talking, and we made all these jokes. We were laughing through the whole thing. The first one was like rich people pretending to be poor, and then they have to tell the people at the end of the date that they're into their process that they're rich people, and it's the reverse of Joe Millionaire, which is not nearly as bad. But the other one was these people were like married at the altar, and you could tell like that part at least was real because they were freaked out. You could, they couldn't act. I mean, they were having panic attacks, and they have these four so-called experts. The kind of experts that Lifetime could afford, like who would come together and figure out, like, do basically matchmaking, which is ancient stuff, and I know about like arranged marriage from my association with India and the Sajmark system and the arranged marriage system they have there. And I know how tough it is. I know that there's good things about it, but how tough it is for Westerners to not get a say or choice in their decision making process. But the main thing. Let's get back to the main point here. They have to explain what's going on in four different ways, like multiple times in the same episode. I'm like, how stupid are the people watching this? They need this level of explanation. Like they, after they get married, they have to make a decision to move in with, to one of the two people's apartments, right? Which obviously they're in New York City, where it's, rents are really expensive. And they have crazy commute times where you might have a 2-hour commute if you're on one side of the city or whatever. People, some of the people are in New Jersey or Brooklyn, these things. And so, they have to make a decision where they're going to live, whether they're going to move to one of the two apartments or they're going to get a new apartment that's more convenient. And, these logistical things will kill relationships that happen online. Like you can meet people online all the time, but then who's going to move to who and all these things, right? All these relationship killers. And they have an expert explains how stressful it is to move, especially when you've just met somebody and you're married to them, right? And then they have the participants talk about it. Like, and they do this all the time where they have an expert explain why this is stressful. And then the participants talk about their stress. And they do it like 4 times in one episode. There's an EMT, like a young guy, like he's an EMT. And his mom has stage 4 lung cancer. And they have said that 3 or 4 times in every episode. And they play the clip where he's talking about it. Like they go back and review these clips. And like, who has such limited amount of retention? Like, we don't watch TV that like stupid people watch. Like once in a while we watch like a stupid show and we, like this one or these type of shows. And, it's like you're not invested in the show. Like it's more of a, like let's make fun of this kind of thing, right? And it's like, wow, this is how stupid people are. They have to be told over and over again. Very basic concepts. Things that you would figure out without them telling you at all. Like everyone knows it's stressful to move in. Everyone knows it's stressful to marry a stranger. You don't need someone to explain it to you. And they get these very cheesy experts, right? So there's that level of stupidity, right? But at the same time, there is this truther thing that's going on. And it's going on at different levels where people are looking through the facade, the illusion, and they don't take anything at face value. They don't trust anything coming from the system. And that's more and more people. It's at least a third of the people, which they know is a nightmare because I've talked about this before with Sajmark, that it's 1/3 is critical mass. Once about a third of the people are, there's a change in consciousness, it can't be stopped. It'll keep on growing and there's no way to put it back in the bottle. So these two things are going on simultaneously, whereas Idiocracy, where everything's stupid and incompetent and breaking down. But at the same time, there's an awareness of everything. And so speaking of this, Idiocracy and stupidity, there's been a few more comments. Let's start here maybe. Somebody writes, RFK Jr. is a truther that will sign a bill banning handguns and rifles. Sorry, Trump wins. Now, the first part is semi-true statement. RFK has said that he doesn't want to, and he was talking about carrying rifles around. I explained this in my video. Like, in the interview, like he has a much more complex policy. He's not a gun grabber. If he said in the interviews that he looks at these, big events, these tragic events that happen, and he doesn't blame the guns. Like, in fact, the media was attacking him for talking about, the idea of meds, of different kinds of psychological medications and antidepressant and serotonin inhibitors, things that cause people to have suicidal and murderous ideation and depression and things as a factor, violent video games. So he talked about other things than the mainstream media talks about in terms of these events. Now, does he say the events are staged or faked? I didn't hear him say anything like that, but that's out. Like, that's they've controlled that part of it with what happened with Alex Jones and all that. Like, that's in the way that they treat that on social media. So that is whatever it is, right? And whether he believes it, I don't know. But in terms of his position, it isn't like he's a gun grabber. He said, I don't want to take anything away from people, but if the House and the Senate pass a bill, I'll sign it. I'm not going to veto it. That's all he said. Like, he's not, he's certainly not a person that's talking about the gun grabbing the way most liberals are. And he's a hunter and a fisherman outdoors person, which he talks about. That's his love for the environment and protecting the environment comes from, which he, legitimately has stories and things about. But the important piece to this is they haven't been able to get your guns. If you have them, they haven't been able to do that. They haven't even come close to that. Every other country has. Pretty much every country out there, they've been able to rein in firearms. In America, that's one thing they can't do. For whatever reason, they just can't get it done. And they've tried, right? And there's, I don't know if it's the NRA or just the fear of uprising, but they just, them going door to door and taking back, there's like over 400 million personal owned guns out there. So, that's a big task. Going door to door and taking the guns, like, that's a whole different level of whatever it is, intrusion. And, they're not even close to that place. And so I don't know what you're, that, like, so somehow Trump is better than him because of that. Like, the Trump thing, Trump's an obvious shill, right? There's a few more Trump thing comparison here. And there's just a stupidity. Hearing P.O. Pockets of the Future, which the person should have put POTF, talk about RFK like QBs talk about Trump as entertaining. Don't care, don't need to know. And the person got that wrong. They got two things wrong. The way that they said Pockets of the Future. And the other thing was, it's don't tell me, don't care, don't need to know. Like, it's not that hard. There's a huge difference here because I don't believe the system can be saved. So I don't have hopium. There's a, phenomenal difference. And, I'm not offended by this, but you're stupid. Like, your inability, this is, you're anti-truther because if you know my sayings enough, and he's using the saying QBs, which is something I made up, and he's using the don't tell me, don't care, don't need to know as a way of mocking me. But if you're so bad at it, because what you're doing is being dishonest here. This is dishonest because no one who listens to me would say, I have the same level of hopium for RFK, which I have zero. Like, I don't think he's going to get elected. I don't think the Democratic Party will nominate him, even if he wins. And I'll go through this as we look at the MSNBC video. I don't believe he'll become president. If he did, I don't believe he could change anything. I made it very clear in my belief system, what I believe about the Sajmark teachings, is that the system has to go down, and that's a good thing. Not for us on a material level, but for the future of this planet and humanity. That, the spiritual well-being of all of us, this demonic system has to go down. And no one can stop it because it's divine will, including RFK or anybody else. So to compare me to QBs and their hopium is just fundamentally dishonest and weak on your part. Like, if you're going to mock somebody, you need to be truthful about it. And I'm going to get into this because it's what they're doing on MSNBC. When I mock people, I nail it. Like, I'm right. Like, I get them, right? When I mock people here, it's, I don't have to make things up. I don't have to exaggerate their positions. I don't have to, suspend reality. I can just, speak truth, right? I can just, call it like it is. But when you have to make something up, there's nothing, like my talking about RFK. The reason I'm talking about is because, for one, he represents the truther point of view more than any other candidate we've seen. And the way he's being treated is being treated as a truther, and you'll see it on MSNBC, which I'll go through in a moment. And he is potentially able to wreck the Democratic Party, humiliate them, humiliate Joe Biden, humiliate the Democrats, make them choose somebody even if they clearly didn't win. Like, if RFK wins, I would think the Democratic Party will then just take it away from him. Like, he'll have more votes, or, it'll be whatever it is. And they'll just not let him be the nominee because they can do that. And, they're going to do that. I would assume that's what they would do, making them do that. This person, Paul, I quit watching you when you couldn't see the difference between Trump's vision of a country and the death cult's vision of a country because your spiritual practice is obviously lacking when you can't see the differences between what a sinful man looks like compared to the other side, that it's desired the destruction of innocence, and it's desire the destruction of innocence and moral integrity. You really need to get saved. Now, you're saying that that you can't see through Trump's BS. Like, Trump is just about himself. He reeks of narcissism. Like, and I don't know what to do with something like this, right? I mean, a person like this, like, I couldn't, help this person because their level of consciousness. Now, Trump is a deceiver, right? Trump, and it's what I liked about Trump because he's kind of honest about it and obvious. He's not trying to hide it like Joe Biden. They try to hide it, and Joe Biden is a complete scumbag, and they won't even acknowledge it at all. Where Trump, you kind of, I mean, I thought even Trumpers kind of got that he was a scumbag, but they can't do that. And Trump doesn't have a vision for the country. He has a vision for himself. You've seen how he's turned on all of his friends and people. He turns on people, throws people under the bus. Trump is about Trump. He cares about Trump. And he's made that fairly obvious. And when he steals your money and uses it for his legal defense fund, he steals everything from you. And he uses it because, he's self-centered and narcissistic. And anybody can see it. Like, anybody who wants to see it can see it. Right? And, to start off with, Paul, I quit watching you. That shouldn't be a comment at all. Because if you're watching me, why are you commenting here? Right? And then it says this. But I saw a clickbait title and won't bother watching. But it's apparent you've decided now that it's worth voting because RFK aligns with you regarding Big Pharma and other many things. I admit he makes a lot of sense. It does not appear to be part of the left's death cult. It's not that he's against these things. I'm not a policy voter. I am somebody who would like to see the show go in a direction that would be more entertaining for me. And I want to see people, I want this stuff to be put out there and, these people humiliated because it'd be fun to watch. And it's what they deserve. I mean, on whatever level that is. Whatever level they can, the truth to come out. But Kennedy is much more sincere as a person, and he appeals to people who are intelligent in a way that Trump doesn't. Trump has gone complete, like, to just stupidity. Like, if you listen to Trump and you believe Trump, you're just like, below average IQ. And IQ probably isn't the right measurement. You're below average intelligence. And not just intelligence, but your comprehension of reality, right? Your consciousness level. Like, it's what I was talking about earlier. It's for stupid people. Joe Biden is for stupid people. MSNBC and CNN are for stupid people. People who are so weak that they need something. They can't handle the cold hard truth that your system is like hanging by a thread. The system we're 100% dependent on is hanging by a thread. It's stressful and fear-inducing for everybody. Like if I really think about it, I'm like, wow, this kind of sucks. Like, you just can't die. And what's going to happen when your lifestyle changes so dramatically and people are around you are freaked out and everything you've come to depend on is pulled out from under you like a rug. Like I know about it and I've known about it for many years now, like the possibility. And now I know it's inevitable. And I'll more than likely see it pretty blatantly in my lifetime. And like it's scary, right? It's scary for people. And, everyone has their own way of going about this, right? But the fear of it, and here's the game, right? Here's the game the Democrats and Trump and the Biden people are playing, the people that are playing on you. All right, the system is pretty much effed up. They all admit that. That, Biden, we're working to save the soul of this country, right? So both sides agree that we're on a disastrous course, right? You see the game, like they both say that. That's number one, that we're on a disastrous course. And if we don't change course, it's over, right? So that's, fear-based system, fear-based way of looking at it. But the good news is there's a good side. For the Democrats, it's the Democrats. For the Republicans, it's the Republicans. Or whatever. For the, it's Trump. For the QBs, it's Trump. There's a deep state and then there's Trump, right? And for the Democrats, there's Trump and then there's us. We're reasonable. We're people of science. We're people of, whatever, liberal beliefs. We're people of, all these things. Woke consciousness. Well, we're the good guys. And we got a bunch of good guys here. So if you guys come together, support us, and we beat this one bad guy down, we'll save the soul of this country. That's what the Biden people say. And then Trump says, you support me and I'll drain the swamp. You don't really have to do much. It's just what you believe as Christians, that if you accept Jesus, you're going to get into heaven. And you don't look past it. Like you don't look through the ways that doesn't add up. You don't look through all the manipulation of the religion. And so you have a problem. You see how the system is. But it's not the whole system. It's just one side. There's good guys and bad guys. And you ignore all the evidence that the good guys are just as bad as the bad guys. And you buy into it because you're too weak to handle the truth. Like that's the problem. And Kennedy doesn't do any of that. If you listen to him, he's not fear-baiting. He's not creating enemies. He's not, saying these people are evil, the other side. He's not doing any of that stuff. Like he's not. He's saying, this is a mix of power, money power, which is comprehensive in all the Democrats and Republicans, and it's basically fascism, where corporations and the military-industrial complex has compromised the agencies that are there to protect people from these conglomerate, these oligarchy things, right? It's big energy, big, pharma, big, all these, these ways that money has corrupted politics, and they have warped the system to game the system to make it unfair and rigged against you and for them and all this. And that he has a way of firing people and changing the systems to make that disappear. And the mainstream media, the mainstream people believe it enough to treat him much differently than they're treating Trump, because they can't stop talking about Trump. Why do you think that is? Trump is their number one enemy. They barely talk about Kennedy Jr., and he's right there on the cusp. He has support. Tucker Carlson just did a piece on him and Joe Rogan, and Tucker Carlson has a big audience. He has both the Bernie Sanders liberal supporters and the extreme, right wing, some of the extreme right wing Trump, supporters, right, and truthers. And so he has a huge coalition of different demographics And then there are independents that are going to like him if they see him because he's just more sincere. And so he has the potential. He's much more favorable and much more liked because he's not going like dark or dirty, or he's not like, all about like, fire and brimstone and talking about how evil the other side is. He just doesn't get into that. He has solutions, and he has a reasonable lens in which he sees the world, which he can express, which you hear it, the more you hear it, you're like, oh, this guy sounds reasonable and rational. And so I don't think a person like that will be elected president. But I'd like to see it wreck the system. I'd like everyone to get it shoved in their face because it'll show you how corrupt the system is. As Kennedy, and he's got a lot of support already, a support they won't acknowledge. He's in the same place Joe Biden was when Joe Biden was the chosen one. He had 20%, like all of 2019. He never really got above 20% of Democrats, but he had no support among Republicans and truthers with RFK does. RFK has a huge following that people don't even know about, and potential people that haven't listened to him. Like I hadn't listened to him. He's been around for a number of years in the truth community, and I don't care about this stuff. I don't listen to it. But YouTube recommended a video. My wife was talking about it, and we listened to him. I'm like, yeah, he's different, right? He's just different than these other candidates, and he appeals to smart people. He isn't, got a dumbed down message, and he's appeared to people who are waking up and have a change of consciousness. Like he's, and with the Kennedy brand and thing, he has an absolute, different, like legitimacy that, he comes from money and he's part of the club and all these things. And so they don't know what to do with it. We're going back to the comment here. The person says, but I saw the clickbait title and won't bother watching it. But you want to comment because you don't even know what I said. And what I say is reasonable. Because you won't get past your hopium and your Trump cult. You're a cult member of Trump. That I will never, no matter what Trump does, you won't confront that he's like narcissist and he sucks. And the energy's gone for Trump. Whatever energy Trump had, whatever swagger he had, it's gone. It's just gone. It's not there. RFK is the star of the show now. He's where all the energy is. But they don't want to acknowledge it. Where before the CNN and MSNBC, they can't stop talking about Trump, and they very hesitantly talk about RFK, even though he's just knocking on the door. But it's apparent you're decided now that it's worth voting because RFK aligns with you regarding Big Pharma and many other things. I admit he makes a lot of sense and does not appear to be part of the left's death cult. So I wanted to pop in and leave a comment that I can't return to when RFK announces he's decided to join Trump as vice presidential candidate. Somehow I didn't get the rest of this guy's comment, but you get the idea. Like it's just a lack of consciousness, right? You're not being honest with yourself. So then the person says this. So I want to pop, this is the rest of the comment. Decided to join with Trump as vice presidential candidate. Those two play chess a lot better than you do, apparently. Will you vote for the combined ticket, or is Trump's wealth and mean tweets going to keep you from seeing a bigger picture? He's not joining with Trump. It's not happening. First of all, he's a bigger star than Trump is. And, look at who Trump had before, Mike Pence, who's a dial tone. Trump has to be the star of the show. And, you see the way he's treated DeSantis and all these other people. Trump is so, whatever. If you can't see it, if you're still a Trumper at this point, like, what are you doing here? Like, all right, so let's get into the MSNBC thing here. Okay, so this is embarrassing for even MSNBC, right? So they're trying to do a hit piece on our RFK Jr. RFK Jr. just keeps on moving the goalposts. Peter Hotez on debating anti-vaxxers. And so this is 70,000 views, which I assume most of them are going to be JFK supporters, right? And here's the warning up here from YouTube, the qualifier, to learn more about the COVID-19 boob. And here it is. Podcasting juggernaut Joe Rogan set off a Twitter storm after he challenged well-renowned scientist Peter Hotez. So Peter Hotez, who's obviously a complete tool and like just not a believable person, is a well-renowned vaccine scientist, right? This guy's the real deal. He's great. To debate infamous anti-vaxxer and now presidential candidate RFK. Mehdi talks to Peter Hotez about debate me bro culture and the absurdity of demanding medical professionals debate conspiracy theories, right? So this is how they're qualifying this story. And let's get into it here.
One Joseph James Rogan, podcasting juggernaut, former...
Okay, so I'm in the editing process, and this is it's a 10-minute video, and my ripping it to shreds is like 50 minutes. So I already know what's coming. But just the tone of his voice and his English accent, which I'll get to in a moment, is, there's a very condescending attitude here. And when you're doing a hit piece, every descriptive word, right, when he described Dr. Peter Hotez, here, let's go back to the description here. It says here, podcasting juggernaut, it's a term he uses again there, right? So that's what he said, just introducing this segment. Joe Rogan set off a Twitter storm, so he's referring to him as a podcaster. I'm a journalist, and he's just a podcaster trying to demean what Joe Rogan's doing because he's getting clobbered in the ratings, which I'm going to cover in just a moment here, right? And he said, podcasting juggernaut Joe Rogan set off a Twitter storm after he challenged the world-renowned vaccine scientist Peter Hotez. So he's the good guy. He's the guy with the credentials and the guy who's doing this segment, the Mehdi Hassan show. He's a journalist. Joe Rogan's just a podcaster, right? And then it says here, and now presidential candidate RFK, it says, debate infamous anti-vaxxer. Peter Hotez to debate infamous anti-vaxxer and now presidential candidate RFK Jr. So he knows what a big deal it is to be an anti-vaxxer. That's a derogatory term. And talks to Dr. Hotez about the debate me bro culture and the absurdity of demanding medical professions debate conspiracy theorists. Lowly, low-life, not even human, evil conspiracy theorists, right? That's how that's all framed. And these people are supposed to be against racism, are supposed to be against prejudice and, all these types of things. The woke people, the woke liberal media, and yet they can totally disparage podcasters who are destroying them in the ratings, right? Podcasters, just a podcaster, and anti-vaxxers and conspiracy theorists. These are all loaded terms to say that we're all evil, right? And so he's already, just in the first sentence, played himself out as a complete fraud. Because watch what he says about Joe Rogan. He's going to get into Joe Rogan being a racist, a anti-Semite, and a transphobe. That's his definition of Joe Rogan. That's how he's going to define him. And yet, look at the hate and the way that they belittle and, a group of people that makes up 30% of the population. Demean all of us. 50% of the population believes in at least one conspiracy theory. I'm going to come back to this. Remember this because it's going to come back up later on. Mehdi Raza Hassan is a British-American broadcaster and best-selling author. He has the Mehdi Hassan Show, which is Sunday nights at 8 p.m. So most people don't know him or who he is. Like, I mock this guy regularly because he's sort of their anti-conspiracy theory guy. He's their Donny O'Sullivan. And they usually export this position. Donny O'Sullivan is Irish. This guy has a British accent. It says here, Moved to Washington, D.C., United States to work as a full-time Al Jazeera upfront and host of Deconstructed podcast. So he moved to America in 2015. So he's a British citizen. He's not even really an American, right? He was born to immigrant Indian Hyderabad Shia Muslim parents from Hyderabad, which is where the ashram, the big ashram for Heartfulness is. I've been to Hyderabad a number of times. But he went to British school here. Like, he has a British accent, right? And his show is, again, not one of their shows you even know that's there. Like, most of you probably have never really heard of this guy. And I've shown him a few times because he's said a bunch of stupid stuff. But he's their Sunday at 8 p.m. guy. His total of the 18 to 50 demographic, he gets 40,000 views. So an insignificant show. And so this is a big story. And this is their guy. Peter Hotez is their guy. He's been on their shows multiple times. But he didn't go on any of their regular shows. He didn't go on Morning Joe, or he didn't go on Rachel Maddow, or any of their prime time. He didn't go on even with Hammer Boy, right, with Hammer Time guy, the Hammer guy. He didn't go on with any of those guys. They're weekly stars. Again, they have a low views of the desired demographic. So they stuck this story. They hid this story, on Sunday at 8 o'clock, right? And he has, this video here has 70,000 views, which is huge for MSNBC. But Joe Rogan's interview, conservatively, Joe Rogan gets 12 million views per show. But they're estimating that it's more like 40 million. And, in these clips and things and stuff that's shown, the RFK show got more views than his normal show. And so this guy has 40,000 people, his weekly show. He's got this doctor that's a complete ass clown. And he's coming on, and he's coming in hard to nobody watching, right? They stuck him with this thing because they want to, they don't want to give any kind of publicity to RFK, right?
I'm a Fear Factor host and proud free thinker, made quite a bit of...
So proud free thinker. This is like the British mocking tone, right? And I mock people all the time. It's what I do here. But I, admit that I'm kind of an asshole, right? Like, I'm not hiding it. I'm not pretending to be some hoity-toity British journalist over here in America and telling America how, dumb we are and how better they are over there or whatever it is, right? I mean, I'm not, or just being a so-called journalist who's out there openly mocking people and pretending to be like a news person. They're trying to be what we are, right? Because they're losing. Nobody's watching them.
News yesterday. No, not for once again spewing racial slurs or spreading anti-Semitic tropes or platforming some infamous transphobe.
Okay, so they screwed him with the picture. And some of you guys have noticed that I have just this ability to stop, when I'm to hit, pause and get the person in this really awkward facial expression. And to me, it's a way of showing their real internal reality. Like, these people are polished and not, having a poker face. People in the news, people who are famous. And, it's so you don't see what they really are inside. But I have this ability to stop and screw these guys over. And, and I sometimes do it intentionally, but I usually don't have to. It just happens organically. But here they're taking this picture. He looks like he has crazy eyes. You see his tattoo, so that makes him look illegitimate. He's not like wearing a suit and tie like this guy, this professional dead-eyed MNFer, right? And they're talking about him using the N-word, which he apologized for. And he didn't use it in a way that was, he's not a racist, right? The way that they're trying to say here. There's stuff to do with vicious lies about the Jewish people. Again, no one thinks he's really anti-Semitic. Joe Rogan spreading transphobic hate. And so these are all headlines. Men's Health, Deadline, and New York Times. all shill magazines. Nobody thinks this guy's these things, right? But this is this guy saying this guy's evil. He's saying he's evil. This is as a news person, and then he's going to get into RFK as evil. And somehow this guy that he's going to bring on, Dr. Peter Hotez, is legitimate life-saving doctor. Is just doing the right thing, right? But all these shows and these networks are propped up by big pharma, including Pfizer. And so they're not, talking about that they are, they're not, it's not, the full disclosure stuff, right? And, they're not saying that this is a reasonable point of view. These are ridiculous, crazy, evil people that are damaging society. And, the gaslighting here, right? Let's get into it.
This time it was for a conversation with RFK Jr. that wasn't exactly, shall we say, tethered to reality.
So this is the arbiter of reality here. This guy isn't tethered to reality, you dumb Americans, right? We have reality here on MSNBC. We give you the truth, even though nobody watches it, and we're trying to copy. I mean, they didn't do it like I don't think this guy watches my show. But he did the Joseph R. Rogan or whatever his middle name is, the thing I do with the J, the mocking thing, the mocking tone, and then the stuff to do with the picture. And then, it's not true what he's saying. Again, they look for an argument. All right, we're going to tear somebody down. We're going to go for a hit piece. So what can we make up? How can we label this person? This is what they do in politics for years. And now they're trying to do it even more so in these, this gaslighting journalism, journalism in air quotes, where they just make something up. Like, I don't have to make something up. Like, I do the same behavior, but I speak truth. Like, this is what I'm saying about this guy is truthful. It's obviously truthful to anybody who's got a pulse, right? That this guy is, somebody who is being paid to do a hit piece on somebody. And so they just make up whatever convenient narratives they are that they know deep down themselves aren't true. And they know that they're all about lies because they're liars that cover up liars that are paid by corporate big money liars and all these things, right?
Highlights from the episode include Kennedy, now a Democratic presidential candidate.
Just the way he said Kennedy, right? The way he says it right there. Just listen to the way he says it.
Reality. Highlights from the episode include Kennedy, now a Democratic presidential candidate, informing the audience that he's taken precautions in case...
So again, mocking tone, Kennedy and precautions.
The CIA tries to assassinate him.
Okay, the CIA has assassinated people for years. And most Americans believe JFK's official story is not true. Over 50% of the people don't believe in the official story surrounding JFK assassination. And HBO, they just ran a sort of semi-comedy Nixon miniseries where the E. Howard Hunt character and his cronies is constantly alluding to them doing the JFK assassination when they worked for the CIA. His Cuban, and these are the guys who broke into Watergate, right? People from Cuba and then some of these other guys. And it's said that on his deathbed he confessed to being a part of that assassination. But either way, RFK and JFK, the original RFK, were assassinated. And this guy, his son, says the CIA, which is a part of the military-industrial complex and does evil stuff all the time, was a part of it. And that's legitimate. Like this clown right here. Look at him. It's legitimate, right? And what's crazy about him being worried about being assassinated when the reaction to his point of view is hit pieces like this. The establishment is against what he's saying, right? And so he has legitimate fear. We all know it. And for this guy to mock that, right? Listen to him.
now a Democratic presidential candidate, informing the audience that he's taken precautions in case the CIA tries to assassinate him. Kennedy doubling down on his debunked claim that vaccines cause autism, and Kennedy asserting that Wi-Fi radiation can, quote, cause cancer and open your blood-brain barrier. Yes.
So let's go back to that.
Brain barrier.
This expression here, right? This guy, this frown. Oh my God, like that's crazy. Now, have you seen any studies, any scientific data? Is he quoting scientific data here as a journalist? Does he have any information to debunk what Kennedy says? Does he have any studies to show you that isn't true? Because I've looked and there isn't any published study on the effects of Wi-Fi. 4G is microwaves, and we know what microwaves do to people. Your smart meter is putting out a microwave pulse every 20 seconds or so in your house. You're getting dosed with low levels of microwaves from 4G and your smart meter and other things in your house, right? And then, 5G is millimeter waves that are even more powerful than microwaves. The military has direct energy weapons, electromagnetic, to combat enemy forces. They have microwave weapons. They have crowd dispersement weapons, microwave, various things, direct energy weapons, right? So they have these lasers that they're messing around with, and then they have these radio waves and things like that. They have these microwave weapons here, right? And pain without injury, so they can make it feels like your nerves are on fire. And, this is for, like I said, some of it has to do with crowd disbursement and any number of things, right? And then we have this with NASA.
Something surrounds you, bombards you.
Bombards you. Something surrounds you and bombards you, right? What is it?
Some of which you can't see, touch, or even feel. Every day, everywhere you go. It is odorless and tasteless, yet you use it and depend on it every hour of every day. Without it, the world you know could not exist. What is it? Electromagnetic radiation. These waves spread across a spectrum from very short gamma rays to X-rays, ultraviolet rays, visible light waves.
Okay, so these are all the things. They used a military term of bombardment. Something's bombarding you.
Even longer infrared waves, microwaves, to radio waves which can measure longer than a mountain range. This spectrum is the foundation of the information age and of our modern world. Your radio, remote control, text message, television.
So we know it does all these things, but here they have the waves.
So, as you sit watching TV, not only are there visible light waves from the TV striking your eyes, but also radio waves transmitting from a nearby station, and microwaves carrying cell phone calls and text messages, and waves from your neighbor's Wi-Fi, and GPS units in the cars driving by.
Again, these things are all going through the walls, which is interesting because I recognized this years ago before I knew anything about this. In the Whispers of the Brighter World messages that are part of the Sage-Mark system, it talks about electromagnetic pollution being difficult or physically harmful, but also your subtle bodies, your spiritual essence. And you look at this, right? I realized that Wi-Fi was going through walls in my house back in 2012. I'm like, well, if it goes through walls, it goes through you. And I started looking into this, and there's all this information out there, but no official studies, right? No environmental impact of 4G waves, 5G waves. If we're going to put these cell towers in, how is it going to affect people? And it does. We're conductors of electricity. We're made up of energy. We're mostly water, which is a conductor. And these waves are going to have an effect on you. And they do. Some people are more sensitive to others, but they know that these things cause varying effects, right? This is NASA, right? They called it bombardment. And, it's there for anybody who wants to look into it. But this sad sack frowning MNFer, listen to him, what he says, right?
And Kennedy asserting that Wi-Fi radiation can, quote, cause cancer and open your blood-brain barrier.
Okay, so do you have proof that that doesn't happen? Frowny McFrowny face.
Yes, you heard that right. A man running for the Democratic nomination for president believes Wi-Fi can melt your brain.
Okay, that's not what he said. He didn't say melt your brain, right? He didn't say that, and that's a mischaracterization. He didn't say that people's brains are melting. He said that the energy can cross the blood-brain barrier, and either that's true or not scientifically. Do you have scientific data to debunk that? Or you just have, this mocking tone that you have and how you're trying to delegitimize this candidate who comes from a, family of prestigious political giants, right? And has a compelling following on a show that crushes you with its viewership, right? Where you get 40,000 people or whatever I said is, his key demographic, 39,000 people. And the key demographic to something that gets, tens of millions, right? And they've relegated this story to you, a guy that most people don't even know works at MSNBC.
Apologies, I suppose, if you're streaming this show from a Starbucks cafe. But what, pray tell, was Mr. Rogan's reaction to this completely unproven and bonkers-sounding claim?
Oh, we got to get rid of Wi-Fi. What the Jamie?
We got to get rid of Wi-Fi. I'll remind
Look at this sad sack.
you that was somehow one of the tamer conclusions of their conversation. Rogan and RFK Jr.'s fear-mongering about vaccines was even more disturbing. So disturbing that Dr. Peter Hotez, a renowned global health expert...
He's renowned. He's renowned. This guy's legitimate.
The co-director of the Center for Vaccine Development at Texas Children's Hospital, tweeted out a Vice article critical of all the misinformation spouted by the pair.
Vice has gone out of business. Vice has filed for bankruptcy. Right? So these are people that nobody wants to listen to. Peter Hotez is on MSNBC, which is a crappy, liberal-leaning, defunct news organization that just is doing slightly better than CNN. And is obsessed with Trump. They can't give you enough Trump, but they're not obsessed with RFK because RFK is, he can't be, if they bring him on, Trump says things all the time that helps these guys. RFK is much more reasonable. They're not even showing you anything that he said. They're not giving his lengthy explanation. He's trying to paraphrase and lie about RFK's positions. Whereas Trump just says things that they can show, and it speaks for itself, right? So they're obsessed with Trump because, Trump works for them, but RFK doesn't. That's why RFK is here on this guy's show. They have to say something, and they're bringing this guy, Peter Hotez, who is an obese, we'll see him in a moment here.
That was not well received by Joe Rogan, who responded by asking Hotez to come on his program and debate RFK Jr., promising to pay $100,000 to a charity of his choice if Hotez agreed to do so. And that was just the beginning. Shortly thereafter, Elon Musk, the chief twit himself, the man who once predicted...
The chief twit, again, this guy with his biting British commentary...
that COVID would be gone by April of 2020, logged on to declare that Hotez's reticence to engage with an infamous anti-vaxxer was evidence that Hotez, quote, knows he's wrong. Look, I literally wrote a book about the art and importance of debate, and yet I am...
So, why won't this guy go debate him?
telling you tonight that I am tired of the incessant debate me bro mantra from conspiracy nuts on social media. Because
you never do. You never do. See, this guy's inner condition, right? He's got these, Sampuca eyes and just, just not a healthy, well person. Debating is something that I personally don't agree with or I would do, because I don't want to listen to the debater. I don't want to listen to I don't want to waste my time listening to the other person's point of view, right? That's what I do with these comments and whatever it is. If it's a legitimate point of view, I've already heard it. And I already know what they think. I know what this guy thinks, right? We have information. I know what both sides' opinion is. And, I'm not trying to win the other person over, and it's just a form of arguing. But if you're a politician or you're these people, this is part of your job, is to debate people. This is how science actually works, right? Let's say you have a scientific theory and you have to drop your thesis, and then you have to prove your thesis to your colleagues or people who are, in a sense, your superiors, right? And they try to rip your thesis apart. So you have to ask yourself all these questions and look into it scientifically to make sure that your thesis, your theory, has validity to it before you put it out there to other people who are going to try to rip it to shreds. And that's how science is supposed to work, right? That you're going to say, all right, this medicine cures people, and then you have to do all these tests to prove that it doesn't have side effects or what the side effects are, and that it actually works. Because that's how experiments work, right? And if you don't do that, and you make claims about something and, for profit or whatever it is, and you haven't done the science on it, it is, can be even considered murderous, right? You're murdering people or making them suffer unnecessarily. And there's been medications that have done that over the years. And there has been scientists who have claimed to have done the research and not done that, or skew the research because they're being paid to do so, right? We know all this. Everyone knows all this. Okay, so this part of the video, my wife had a computer issue I had to go help her with. And I made a voiceover to continue, but while I'm in the editing process, and I just want to point this out again. I want to play this again here.
I'm telling you tonight that I am tired of the incessant debate me bro mantra from conspiracy nuts on social media.
Him saying conspiracy nuts. Now, this guy isn't a psychologist, and he doesn't have data saying that people who believe in conspiracies are nuts, and the majority of people do. More than 50% of people, including him, he believes in Trump conspiracies. And I'll get into this. I'll show you the Hillary Clinton. He's going to re-say this at the end of this video, so I want to slam him for it there, but I just want to point this out here, right, that he's calling us conspiracy nuts and has no scientific data, and his network is full of Trump conspiracies and right-wing conspiracies, but they're not conspiracy nuts. They're just, they're truthers, right? they're their version of truthers. So let's get back to the other point here. Okay, so I took a little bit of a break. My wife was having a computer issue. Turned out to be she needed a new mouse. And then I cut the lawn. And while I was cutting the lawn, I realized that, there was something substantial to talk about here. So Mehdi Hassan is a demographic hire because CNN, and even more so at MSNBC, they want to be as inclusive as possible. They want to be a rainbow of different demographics. And he checks a few of the boxes there. First of all, he's Muslim, so we need some Muslim people there. He worked at Al Jazeera, so he's international. And he's British, and the British are like America's parents or grandparents or whatever it is, right? Like the British have people look at Britain as being, in the British accent, this is what they did with Piers Morgan on CNN, and they've done this with a number of people. The British accent, it has an air of superiority and, like your big brother kind of thing, or somebody who we've been around a lot longer than you were. In a sense, America is an extension of the British Empire, right? Like phase 2 or phase 3 or something. And there's a sense, certainly with the educated ruling class, they have this sense of superiority. You see it in their TV shows and all of it. The royal family on down. And it's like they're talking to their kid brother or whatever it is. But him being a Muslim, Joseph J. Biden, Jojo Magoo, he ordered the death, he executed 8 Muslim children in Afghanistan. He droned them, as did Obama. He droned them recently when they were leaving Afghanistan. And that's something everybody knows. And he was a part of these illegal wars, which we now know were waged for a reason that turned out to be completely false. There was no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. All those wars were wars that we were lied into. and they killed like millions of Muslim people, over 1 million Muslim people, more in Libya where they took out Gaddafi. And this guy's a Muslim, right? And so in a sense, he's selling out his history, his people, for a party and politicians, which are the new neocon, and the CIA. The CIA has been devastating. I mean, the CIA created all these profiles of Muslims that were, terrorists, right? The CIA created these false profiles that everyone thought, especially with those lies that got us into the lies around the big event in 2001. Muslim people have been targeted. Indian people of, brown-skinned people who look like these. I mean, we look at Hollywood and you look at the news media, look at the, information they've put out there to disparage Muslim people as being these terrorists, right? And now they've switched this to make homegrown terrorists, these right-wing extremists, people who follow Trump, people who, they're trying to, stick this on Joe Rogan and RFK here, right? And these profiles that they're doing now were done to this guy's people, like what he comes from as a demographic. And he's completely willing to sell that out for, this crappy show he's got that nobody watches. They stick him in on Sunday night. He's willing to sell out his, go against these horrific crimes, war crimes that were done to Muslim people, brown people all around the world, and then watch it be done to another demographic. And he's got to know, right? And, this idea that they have where he's saying, he doesn't want to debate, he doesn't want this guy to debate Kennedy. But if his position was as ridiculous as they say it is, then it would be a no-brainer. You would go out, present the science, and you would destroy him in a debate. But if you're, going to legitimize him and you're going to lose, that's why you wouldn't debate, right? If you couldn't do that, if you had just all this superiority, all this superior knowledge and superior grasp of science and superior reasoning, and you went on there and you presented it, you would destroy the other person, right? Because they're crazy conspiracy theorists with these mockable beliefs, then they're actually evil, so it's easy to display that. But if you put Kennedy up against these guys, he's going to destroy them because he's got the science, and he's been doing this, he's been litigating this for years. And so, that's the real reason. So they're lying about it, right? Like they're lying because they know that the only way that they can keep this scam going is to not allow you to hear the other side. But it's futile because nobody's watching his show and everybody's watching Joe Rogan's show. I mean, the difference in, and not just Joe Rogan, but people like me, all these people are on the internet. And they can't, it used to be there was one game in town, it was mainstream media. And then there was cable media. But now there's like all this other available information, and they've lost the battle. Like they've been destroyed by the, whatever we do here, right? Like they've been destroyed by the truth, and they no longer can control the narrative. Let's get back to it here. RFK Jr. spews wild conspiracies on Joe Rogan's podcast. Like this is how bad it's gotten. This is how low they've sunk. Like, this is how much of an ass clown you're making of yourself.
It is never a good idea for an award-winning, world-renowned, peer-reviewed vaccine scientist or an actual expert in any academic field to debate an unhinged crank who thinks...
An unhinged crank, he's litigated these cases. He's won these cases, and he has the science to back it. This isn't some unhinged crank. Then why did Fauci talk to him? He sued Fauci and won. Why did these people talk to him? He's not some unhinged crank. Look at him. They're trying to make this guy look great here. I mean, just an absolute...
Because it is never a good idea for an award-winning, world-renowned, peer-reviewed vaccine scientist or an actual expert in any academic field to debate an unhinged crank who thinks Bill Gates wants to control us with microchips or that chemicals in the water are turning kids transgender. And yet...
So this guy who's a scientist can't win in a debate against an unhinged crank.
Yes, RFK Jr. has said both of those things. I mean, set aside for a moment that Joe Rogan wouldn't even be a neutral moderator of such a debate. He's endorsed anti-vax nonsense many times before. But you just can't, in general, debate with conspiracists and loons.
So we'll revisit the conspiracy nut thing, the second insult he just dropped here. So what he's saying here, here's a guy who wrote a book on art of the debate. And anybody who knows anything about debates is you're not trying to convince the other person of your point of view. He's going to say more about that here in a second. Well, let him say it here first, and I'll come back to this.
You can't debate whether up is down, hot is cold, black is white. They never change their minds, and they win just by you agreeing to share a platform with them. What's the...
All right, I'm going to destroy his platform argument in a second. But first, him saying that they never change their minds. Well, neither do sheeple and paid shills, right? Especially paid shills, because paid shills already know that they're liars, and they know that they're being deceivers. All these guys on the news, they got to be really stupid, or they're paid shills, because they know. They see it. They see the evidence. They see the suppression. They see it. And so they're really stupid, or they're just going out there doing their hit pieces because they're horrible people. And so they're never going to change their mind. If you're getting money, Peter Hotez is getting he's got $23 million of money he doesn't deserve for being a shill for Big Pharma, and I'll cover that because he denies that, but that's ridiculous as well. You don't make that money being a professor, right? And so what he said about changing their mind, anybody who knows anything about debating, this guy claims to write a book on it, you don't debate to change somebody's mind. In fact, Peter Hotez says he's willing to have private conversations with RFK Jr. and Joe Rogan. He's willing to do that. And saying that they're crazy or conspiracy theorists or loons, but yet willing to have a private conversation, that's, those things don't add up. When you debate somebody, you're trying to change the audience's mind. You're competing with the other person. And, sometimes you're debating, like if you go to debate class, you're supposed to debate both sides of the issue. They'll make you debate one side of the issue and then make you debate the other. It's about lying and, warping reality and putting on a display so that people like you more or connect with you more or believe you more than the other person. Trump isn't trying to change Joe Biden's mind in a debate. Biden isn't trying to change Trump's mind. Everybody knows this, right? It's like silly to pretend you don't. That you don't understand this. And so him saying that conspiracy theories, loons, you nuts, won't change their minds is stupid because you're not debating the conspiracy theory community or the truther community. You're debating to make them look bad. You're debating because you've been mocking us and talking down to us collectively, and you come from a position of authority, right? So-called authority. You represent the official story. And the difference between truthers or conspiracy theorists and mainstream shills and people like this, disinformation agents and sheeple, is that they never question the official story. They don't question it, or they're there to defend it, and they're saying there's no other story but the official story. But the medical community and Big Pharma have a bad reputation. Almost everybody's has a bad medical story where the medical allopathic medicine has let them down. It's a for-profit business, and they're far from blameless. And Big Pharma, everything that they produce has side effects. I mean, pharmacists say it, doctors say it. They have lists of side effects, and some of them are pretty severe. So it isn't like they're beyond reproach or beyond questioning. In fact, they do scientific studies, and the difference here is JFK is saying that you're ignoring scientific studies for profit, for financial benefit, that they're pushing medicines out that are, that have real dangerous side effects and are not letting people know about them, and that there hasn't been proper studies, or you haven't opened up these studies, or there are studies showing that they do damage. And that's all he's saying. And he has the science, he claims, to back it up. And so what's wrong with going in there and debating this in front of everybody? What about the neutral people who aren't truthers, or they're not, they're not sheeple. Or at least they're open-minded here. Why not allow them to decide for themselves? That's what the debate is. You're not saying that this is, you're never going to change the conspiracy theorist's mind. Well, that's not the purpose of the debate. The minds of the people who are watching it, the ones you don't have access to, and I'll talk about the platforming thing in a second. But we've all had problems. Like, I don't get into debates, but I don't try to change. There's lots of crazy truthers. There's lots of dumb truthers. There's lots of, I don't try to change anybody's mind. I just put the information out here on these videos. And my purpose isn't to change people's minds or, that would be frustrating because people don't change their minds for the most part. I put the information out here and just let it go. But there's debates in the truth community, and some people, it's such a diverse community, right? And it isn't about, you get to a point where you're like, all right, I'm having a conversation with this person. You're having an exchange in comments, which I don't do either. And the person's never going to change their mind. And so you don't do that. But the debate isn't about that, right? The debate is about people who are watching in the audience and them getting information they wouldn't have normally. And let me show the clip again of him saying, you don't give these types of people, crazy conspiracy theorists, a platform.
You can't debate whether up is down, hot is cold, black is white. They never change their minds, and they win just by you agreeing to share a platform with them.
Okay, so as a guy who gets 39,000 of the desired demographic on a cable news program that's everywhere, right? Everyone has access to MSNBC in one way or another. Who gets 70,000 views on a video that's the only one that features a very hot topic, right? So there's nothing else on MSNBC that's on YouTube that features this debate controversy and RFK, who is blowing up on the internet right now. And so your show sucks and gets no ratings. But if you were able to bring some of these people on and gave them a chance to explain their side, you would get so many more views. But you're not willing to do that because you're willing to suck and be irrelevant, and you don't care if anybody watches your show, right? And so giving them a platform, there's no platform. You're not going to give them anything. We have a platform. Even if they're trying to suppress this information, it's out there everywhere. And it's viewed by so many more people than you. You're saying, like, if he goes on and debates him, that he's going to get some sort of give more publicity to RFK Jr. Joe Rogan already kills you in the ratings. Not like more people are going to watch that thing. It's the people that already believe and back RFK that's going to watch it. Because, when two people go at it, when Peter Hotez and RFK Jr. go at it, they're bringing their audience. And Peter Hotez has nothing compared to Joe Rogan and RFK's audience, right? Peter Hotez has 400,000 followers. And we don't know how much that's actually made up. But okay, let's say that's legitimate. That's nothing compared to what RFK and Joe Rogan are doing, right? Joe Rogan has 11 million followers, and this isn't even his main platform. And, so many more people are going to see him. RFK Jr. has 1.8 million followers. So they dwarf Peter Hotez, and they have plenty of places and people who want them to speak. Peter Hotez is relegated to shill channels of CNN and MSNBC, and I've, kind of seen him there. Like, he's not even one of their big guys. He's like, they can't get somebody else, so they get him, right? So you're not giving him a platform. You're going on and you're being exposed. Peter Hotez went on the Joe Rogan podcast. Why did Peter Hotez go on the Joe Rogan podcast? So he could dispute Joe Rogan's positions on the boop, right? That's why he went on. So he was basically debating Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan made the point that the guy's overweight and that the guy said, yeah, he doesn't eat healthy. he eats carcinogen foods and foods that cause heart disease like all these other people. He has a bad diet. He has poor health. He doesn't do things to boost his immune system naturally. Doesn't even know about any of that stuff, right? And he admitted like he doesn't care about all those other things, but he's an advocator of this one thing in which he gets financial remuneration, where he's compensated for his positions on MSNBC and CNN. He's a shill for Big Pharma. And so he needs more exposure. That's why he went on Joe Rogan's show. Instead of, going back down and getting his ass handed to him by RFK Jr., because that's what would happen, he's claiming these other things, right?
Expression, never wrestle with a pig, you both get dirty, and the pig gets 40,000 new followers on Twitter.
Again, that would mean that he would be able to bring in people on Twitter. I just showed you. That's a complete lie. The person that would get more views, everybody who's watching this already knows about RFK Jr. They certainly know about Joe Rogan. If you ask people who's Peter Hotez, who's Joe Rogan, and who's RFK Jr., they would have, very few people are this guy. I've already forgot Mehdi Assad. Like they don't know who you are. And so just by being around them, you're going to get more followers and viewers. I mean, you would if you didn't come on look like a complete ass clown, right? And so you guys would benefit. Your ratings of your show would go up, and Peter Hotez's publicity and his reach on the internet would go up if you guys went on there and were able to do a good job, right? But you can't do a good job. You're just going to play yourself and look like an ass clown.
Joining me now is Dr. Peter Hotez himself. Thank you
Look at this smug MNFer.
for coming back on the show.
Look, he's wearing his jacket coat here. He's wearing his coat like to show he was a doctor with his little bow tie.
It's a shame it's under these circumstances. I understand.
It's a shame. It's such a shame. It's a tragedy. Are you okay? Are you all right?
You've been hit with a deluge of harassment over the last 24 hours. There was even some crazy people who tracked you down and accosted you in person at your home and shouted at you. How are you doing after being called out by the world's richest man and America's most powerful podcaster?
How are you doing? You've been called out by Elon Musk and Joe Rogan. How are you doing? Are you okay, bro?
Well, the attacks from the anti-vaccine lobby do come in waves, and
There's no anti-vaccine lobby. That's a lie. Where's the lobby? Okay, where's the money? Did you hear what this MNFer just said?
well, the attacks from the anti-vaccine lobby do.
There's a lobbying group for anti-vax. The lobbying group is one of the most powerful lobbying group is Big Pharma. And we know this because of everything that's happened in the world with our modern medicine. We know it by the way it was rolled out in COVID. There's no anti-vaccine lobby. There's no powerful entity in Washington that's pushing against vaccines. The anti-vaccine lobby, like they're making it sound like they're the underdog. He's trying to make it sound like he's the underdog. The only way he's the underdog is that the majority of people think he's a tool, don't know who he is, and he went on and said some stupid stuff. He got rolled by Joe Rogan. I mean, he got asked questions that he couldn't answer, and he doesn't want to debate RFK. He's getting publicity now, and he could get even more if he went out there and destroyed RFK in a debate. If he destroyed RFK in a debate.
Come in waves, and this time though it's been one of the tougher ones because, as you point out, of physical stalking and the incessant threatening emails and the stuff online is just total wackadoodle. And let's face it, when you have RFK and Jr. and Joe Rogan and Elon Musk all tag teaming those tres hombres at the same time, I mean, that probably includes just about every follower on Twitter.
Oh, poor guy. Oh, you okay, bro? Okay, so the timeline of this thing, just so people understand this, is that this guy crossed over from shilling for Big Pharma and MSNBC and doing his job wherever he does his thing and getting money from Big Pharma. You know, he's got a net worth of $23 million. Right? I can't say that enough. And he decided to go on Joe Rogan and school Joe Rogan because Joe was anti-boop, right? And so, and it's different every time. And so he crossed over to lecture Joe Rogan. And it didn't go great, which I talked about somewhere in this video. That Joe Rogan even asked him about obesity, and the guy's just, he's not a healthy guy. And so he decided to go to Joe Rogan's audience, who are people who are open to what Joe Rogan's saying. Many of them share his beliefs. And then he decided to go after them when they talked about him on the show. But he was the one who instigated the hostile reaction. He went to debate Joe Rogan. He went on Joe Rogan's show to school Joe Rogan, debate him, and tell him how wrong he was on his, his positions on COVID, particularly to do with the boop, right? And that's what he did. And he's been slamming anti-boopers on TV and other places. And so that's going to get people upset. Like, I don't endorse people threatening people or even harassing them. Like, I don't believe in that thing. I don't believe any of that stuff. But he created that reaction. Like, he's not a victim here. He went after a demographic, and the demographic didn't like it. And this is what he said on Twitter. But before we get to that, I'm in the editing process. Doesn't this guy look like a combination of Captain Kangaroo and Bill Nye the Science Guy? Like, he doesn't look like a real doctor, right? I mean. So this is what Peter Hotez said. Spotify has stopped even sort of trying to stem Joe Rogan's vaccine misinformation. Now, MSNBC and CNN never tried to censor you. In fact, nobody was trying to censor you. And all these people that pushed out this information, a lot of it has turned out to be completely wrong. And you can look up videos on this guy and see things he said that we now know are factually and scientifically incorrect. And ultimately could be dangerous for people, right? But this guy wants Joe Rogan to be censored by Spotify because he doesn't think that you have enough intelligence to discern these things for yourself. This is their position. They can't win by their, rhetoric, so they have to try to censor people with an opposing view. And this is, a weak position. It's really true. Anna Hammerlin, or whatever her name is, some person who was on Vice, just awful. And from all the online attacks I'm receiving after this absurd podcast, it's clear many actually believe this nonsense. Yeah, 1/3 of the population at least believes this. And it's people who are much more, who are better critical thinkers. But this poor guy, right? You went up and you ran your mouth on Twitter. And Joe Rogan said, okay, why don't you debate RFK Jr.? Why don't you come on here and debate him? I'll give $100,000 to your charity. It's been up to $1.1 million, right? Or more than that even now. And he refuses to do it. But he's whining because, when he gets attacked, right?
So it was pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that, especially given the work you do and having to...
Exactly. You're such a stand-up guy.
Deal with these people. I mean, look, contrary to what RFK Jr. and other anti-vax nuts have claimed, there is no connection between vaccines and autism, no connection, no established documented connection between vaccines and serious diseases or mass death.
Do you have the science on that? Can you produce the science? Can you produce the results? In fact, why don't you go and debate some guy who says he has the science in RFK? Why don't you debate him and show everyone that he doesn't have the science? Why don't you cite the studies, bring the studies in there against his studies, and have this out in the open, right?
Vaccines tend to save lives across the board, do they not? That's what the peer-reviewed evidence overwhelmingly shows, does it not? And people
Does it not? Does it not? Does it not? It doesn't not. It doesn't not. Oh, well, I don't know. Does it not?
Dying right now from COVID still because the evidence on COVID vaccines efficacy is being ignored or shouted down on social media.
Well, there's three or four moving parts to this. So I'm a vaccine scientist. I make low cost, patent-free vaccines for low and middle income countries.
He's worth $23 million.
Made 100 million doses of. We made 2 vaccine prototypes that led to 100 million doses being administered in India and Indonesia. No patents, minimal strings attached. So we actually found a way to bypass the pharma companies, and yet RFK Jr. incessantly calls me a pharma shill when, if anything, our vaccines maybe kept Pfizer and Moderna out of markets in India and in Indonesia. So I don't understand.
So how did you get a net worth of $23 million? I didn't hear him call him a pharma shill. I don't think he talks like that, RFK. Like, you can show me where he calls you a pharma shill. But you made $23 million. That's, what your net worth is. So you've done that not just through private practice, but through something. You're a very wealthy man. Most people would think $23 million is a very wealthy, successful person. So where did you get the money? Where did your money come from? All right, so here it is. This is his tweet. I can confirm I received no funds from Big Farm. My salary, I'm a professor employed by a college. Our laboratory, also funded by the college, the hospital, in turn then received grants, gifts from NIH and private philanthropies. Well, we know who best benefits from what you do, right? Well, it's Big Pharma. And then NIH is funded by Big Pharma. NIH has multiple business dealings with Big Pharma. Here it is here. The NIH received $56 million in royalty payments from Big Pharma, right? The NIH and the Big Pharma are tied together. We know this from Fauci. Fauci was in charge of the NIH. The NIH is a shill organization for Big Pharma. Everyone knows it, whether they're willing to admit it or not, right? But they make all this money. They're connected financially. So this is completely dishonest. So who are the private philanthropists? Well, it's going to be people who are pro the stuff, the boop. This guy is a boop shill. He goes out and he shills for Big Pharma. And so he makes a lot of money from somewhere. And so he gets money as a professor. And as a professor, he's amassed $23 million, right? So here he's a professor at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston. It says here, there's the Baylor College of Medicine. It says here, the average salary is $150,000 for a professor. And you could hardly amass $23 million as your net wealth, right? And so who has a lot of money to spend on shills? Big Pharma. Who's connected with NIH? Big Pharma, right?
That piece. And then the reason I got involved with RFK Jr. in the first place is I have an adult daughter, Rachel, who has autism and intellectual disabilities, and wrote the book Vaccines Did Not Cause Rachel's Autism, that refuted all of his false claims. And
okay, what he said, RFK said, was that this guy did not provide any science or studies in his book. That he said, well, basically, I'm a doctor, and that's not true. But RFK and Joe Rogan, I don't know, RFK certainly read his book. And so they've had conversations about this, right? And RFK says he's asked him for the science, and Hotez has never delivered it. And he won't deliver it publicly in a debate. If you have the science, then deliver it. Bring the studies and show the studies and combat and go against his studies, right?
And that's been, he's been kind of after me ever since then. And now he's...
What do you mean after you? What do you mean after you, right? He's asked you to debate these things in public, which is not certainly after you, especially since he has a bigger following and a bigger audience, and so does Joe Rogan. It would actually help you if you were able to debate effectively.
At it again, but this time, Elon, this time, Eddie, it's caused something really terrible.
Called him Elon.
Horrible, and that is during our COVID pandemic. I have a new book coming out that basically says 200,000 Americans needlessly perished because they believe the anti-vaccine disinformation.
Wait, you're saying anti-boopers killed 200,000 people? That's what you're claiming? Killed 200,000 people. That's your new book.
And refused to take a COVID vaccine during our Delta wave and BA1 Omicron wave in 2021-22 after vaccines were widely available. So the point is anti-vaccine...
You're evil. They're evil. The anti-vaxxers are evil.
Disinformation, it's always done a lot of damage and harm, but now it's a lethal force in the United States, and that's why we have to have that discussion. And I offered to come.
Yeah, exactly. Have that discussion. Let's have that discussion. He said that's why we have to have this discussion.
It's a lethal force in the United States, and that's why we have to have that discussion. And I offered to come and go on Joe Rogan again. I've been on a couple of times, and have that discussion with him, but not to turn it into the Jerry Springer show with having.
It's not going to be Jerry Springer. RFK is a polished, well-educated, very successful lawyer who comes from a prestigious family, and is not. He doesn't say other people are evil, as I said earlier. He doesn't get into the whole demonizing other people. He just says, you present your science, I'll present mine. And he's litigated these things. It's not going to be Jerry Springer. This guy's saying he's willing to go on Joe Rogan. The reason he went on the first time is because he's going to get access to an audience he usually won't get access to. But he won't debate RFK. It's because he's a puss boop. Because... I should have done that better. He's a boop. And so, debate him. Like it's just you're a coward, right?
Bring RFK Jr. on.
He's such a little whiner, too. This guy's like a complete arrogant shill, and this guy's such a whiner.
It's sad because I said I'm so fed up with the debate me, because it's not really about the debate. If it was about finding out information, as you said, you've already written about vaccines and autism. You've already spoken and written about COVID vaccines. I think you've been on MSNBC and other channels hundreds of times since the start of the pandemic.
Again, that's just stupid because there is a whole level of population, and they want the population that's anti-boopers, right? They want that population to be a customer. And that's part of their job as shills to do that. Shills for Big Pharma or whatever it is. And he wrote these books because he's wanting people to see the beauty of these so-called medicines. That's why he wrote the book. That's why he's gone on MSNBC. MSNBC gets almost no viewers. It's the same demographics. Most of the viewers are over 50 years old, and they're liberal, democratic sheeple. It's a very small segment of the population, and most people don't know who this guy is. And everybody wants a bigger audience. He has a social media platform. He's written books. He doesn't want to sell more books. He doesn't want to promote himself as a brand, which he would totally be able to do to a new audience. That's why he went on Joe Rogan in the first place. And he would get a lot more publicity because of this debate. People don't read books anymore. They don't watch MSNBC. So this guy went on Joe Rogan to reach a new audience, and things have backfired for him because he knows he can't stand up and debate RFK. There's no other reasonable explanation here. They're making excuses, but none of those excuses hold any water, right? It's because you don't want to lose because you don't have the science. And if you did, you could just go in there and school the guy. But that isn't going to happen, right? He's not even going to try. He's, he's a wanker, as they say in England.
Hear your views and the evidence you bring to this. So they're not actually interested in evidence. And it saddens me that you're a man.
Well, they are interested because they want they're giving you a chance to present your evidence. So that's a lie. You're lying. They're totally interested in it. Otherwise, they do what you did. They would disparage this guy without giving him a chance to respond. They would come on and just destroy this guy and not give him a chance to speak for himself. But they're not doing that. Joe Rogan's offering his very popular, he is the number one podcast. He's offering for unlimited time for this guy to present 50% of the time, him present what's going on here. What his position is, what his science is. And
you guys are not willing to do that. You're not willing to give. You said don't give them a platform. They're giving him a platform. You're unwilling to give RFK a platform. So much so that they're covering this on your crappy little Sunday night show that nobody watches.
Who basically has saved lives abroad with the vaccines you've developed, whereas RFK has contributed to a culture, a vaccine misinformation culture, that has led to the deaths, as you say, of hundreds of thousands of lives, and yet he's the
Wait a minute. As he says, you just heard this a second ago, and as a reporter, you're just taking his word for it without looking at the science. That RFK has contributed to 200,000 deaths because he said he wrote a book about it, and you haven't read the book, and now you're like, well, yeah, look, I agree with you. You must be right.
one being celebrated by tech billionaires like Musk and Jack Dorsey, while you're being smeared and defamed. And I would say, I don't know if you've agreed to debate or not. My advice is not to, and people might find that surprising because I wrote a book about debate. But
They would find it surprising that you're a liar and you wrote a book about debate, but you're unwilling to tell this guy don't debate, even though he'd be exposed to more people. And he'd be getting a platform you guys usually don't have, right?
I just think there's a time and a place for a debate. I don't think a historian of World War II should debate a Holocaust denier. That's my analogy here. Like, I don't think...
That's a horrible analogy because they are saying, Hotez particularly, and this guy's also saying, that there are people out there that are unwilling to get the boop in the future and certainly now. And, they're becoming more and more a growing population of anti-boopers, right? And they think that those people should get it, right? That's their position. They want to convince people to get it. And so by debating and showing RFK to be a fraud, they would be likely turn some of those people. If he performed well in the debate, or people who are on the edge or aren't sure. I mean, he went on to Joe Rogan to convince Joe Rogan's audience that Joe Rogan was full of you-know-what. And part of that was Joe Rogan having to, comply with Spotify because of the backlash he was getting. So he came on to be kind of like a handler and all these things. Joe Rogan came out and said, well, I'm not a doctor, and all these other, positions he took to save his, multi-million-dollar deal with Spotify. And so, that's why he went on the show in the first place. So if he could win, he would go on there. It has nothing to do with the quality of the opponent. It isn't like it's going to be Jerry Springer like they said. It's that JFK or RFK has the goods. Like I said, I wouldn't debate Fauci on medicine because he would win. I can't on science, right? I don't know how to read science. I'm not interested in science. I don't want to listen to Fauci, right? But if I was debating him on him being a shill and I could, show video clips and expose him for what he is, I would destroy him. Like, you got to do what you're good at, right? And this guy is supposed to be good at his job. And so he doesn't have enough confidence. He's out there shilling for all this, for this, the boop, right? He's shilling for it. And yet he doesn't have confidence that he could beat RFK. And it's pretty obvious that's the only explanation.
These debates between experts and cranks do anything other than elevate the cranks.
Again, they're already elevated. They already have more followers and a more bigger following. They already has more viewers. There's no question about this. You guys are limited. You have a dying audience that, like it's a joke. There's nobody watching this. The Joe Rogan podcast was watched by at least 12 million people, but it's really probably many more. And people like me are talking about it, like I talked about it. So there's another, 10,000 views that are coming from just my channel. Never mind all these other channels. Tucker Carlson just covered it. So this is Tucker Carlson's Bobby Kennedy is Winning, and it's got 31 million views. It came out shortly after that podcast, right? And so, I mean, it's like the difference here in terms of this guy. This video has 70,000 views. And then whatever his audience was, it's mostly, we know the people that are there, right? An undesirable demographic of older generation people who are, who watch the news. And, this guy is whatever, amount of Muslim people that might follow him just because of something like that, right? When you have somebody who's from a demographic that doesn't get a lot of, there's not a lot of Muslim journalists. Again, journalists in air quotes here because it's MSNBC. You're going to have a following just because of that, right? And that's you see that a lot, where there's a demographic that doesn't have a lot of people out there representing them, so they support that demographic. We've seen it over and over again. And even with this guy's got nothing. This guy's got nothing compared to what Bobby Kennedy and Joe Rogan have. And so they're the ones who are offering it's like they're slumming to have somebody with such a little following in terms of social media debate them.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, there are certain things you debate. I understand what a debate about 18th century Enlightenment philosophy is and debating Rousseau and Bishop Berkeley. I understand what political debates are. But in science, we don't typically do debates. What we do is we write scientific papers.
Okay, but you have to support your thesis, which is a form of debate. And it's debated, come on. You just have to prove the science. You have to bring in the scientific studies. If you have them, you have them. And you have to be able to say you read RFK's studies, and you have to, through your scientific lens, destroy his studies. And you're not willing to do that, right? You're just writing crappy books. You're coming on to friendly networks that nobody watches, like this one and CNN. And, you're just a liar, right? You're just none of this stuff holds water.
We present our findings in front of a critical audience of our peers to
which is the debate, which is they try to rip it apart.
Solicit their input and suggestions, but one doesn't typically debate science. Maybe the one.
Okay, they ask you questions that are challenging, and they do research into your topic, and they try to destroy it because that's good science, right? And so it's a debate.
Off discussion of evolution versus creationism and that sort of thing, but that's not what we do in science. And so that's problem number one. Problem number two is to debate with RFK Jr.
But you went on and debated Joe Rogan. What you did with Joe Rogan was an anti-booper, and you went on his show and this is how this all started, to tell him he was wrong. It was essentially a debate, right? And you're even this guy saying that it would be 2 against 1 if Joe Rogan hosted the show. But Joe Rogan, he just let RFK talk. And so this would be something where Joe Rogan would be just offering a platform. He would do very little in terms of being a moderator. And you have debated. This is, you've debated people, just we won't debate RFK.
I've discussed this issue with him many times by phone and by email.
Again, is it a discussion or debate? Why just not make that public? You've discussed it with him, and you're not willing to make those discussions public, right? I don't debate. I'm not willing to debate. He can call me privately. We can talk. He said, Joe, you have my number. He offered that Joe Rogan talk to him on the phone, but he doesn't want to do it publicly because he's going to get exposed. That's the only reason that you wouldn't do it, right? That that you're going to be shown to be a shill.
Problem is, he just keeps on moving the goalposts. I mean, first it was the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine that caused autism. What's that?
Moving the goalposts is literally what conspiracy theorists do.
What did he do? They just gave away the game, right? Because you can't say that when there are people who are good debaters around. You can't say that when people will call you on your bull boop, right? We know that Fauci, and this guy Peter Hotez, and all of them, Jojo Magoo, Biden, all the rest of them, came out and said that if you take the boop, then you would not get COVID. I mean, Joe Biden said this several times. And I have a whole meme of it. I can show you my meme. I showed it so much on my other channel. I've showed it here sometimes. But this is all the times they said things that weren't true. And then they came out and said, well, afterwards, Pfizer came out and said, when Pfizer had to testify, that they never once even looked into the idea that their boop would prevent you from getting COVID. So they admitted there was never any science behind that, and they knew that that wasn't true. And so that's been well documented. But then they said, okay, you'll get it, but it won't be as severe. And then that turned out to be wrong. So this is them moving the goalposts, right? And then they said, well, you'll get it, and it could be severe, but you won't go to the hospital. And then that turned out to be wrong. They said, well, you'll get it, you might go to the hospital, but you're not going to die. And that turned out to be wrong. And so they moved the goalposts, and they did it throughout the process. Fauci was constantly saying, after he was found out to be wrong, well, the science at the time, we were just telling you what the available data at the time. You know, we can't do anything. That was the data at the time. We just told you what the data was. And so they were moving the goalposts, and they always do. And again, when you're in this kind of a situation where you're just getting together with like-minded people, you can say things like this and get away with it. But if you're going to debate RFK, you can't say he's moving the goalposts because he's going to call you on it, or any of these people. And they know it, right? So they can do this when they're alone or they're, disconnected from, they've excluded any sort of alternative opinion. But this is why they don't want to debate. Because you're going to say stupid stuff like they move the goalposts, and they're constantly stealing our stuff. They're constantly stealing truther stuff, because that's where all the energy is. They steal our names, our titles for things, names of programs. They steal our way of presenting information. And then they steal something like when they do something, they accuse us of doing the thing that they're doing. Like this is classic, controller BS.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, and so then it was, the thimerosal preservative in vaccine, then spacing vaccines too close together, then alum in vaccines. Then it was the HPV vaccine that they said caused infertility or autoimmunity. And then vaccines cause something called chronic illness. So you're always kind of playing this Pyrrhic game of whack-a-mole. You knock something down and it pops up, or moving the goalposts. And it turns out it's very unproductive. And
not if you go on there and you dispute what he's saying right now. He is saying something that that's concrete, that you can bring evidence in. It's not moving the goalposts, right?
And it's also pretty exhausting as well.
It's exhausting. It'd be so tired. It's so exhausting.
Exhausting, unproductive. It's disingenuous as well, and kind of ludicrous. I mean, Robert Kennedy Jr. is an environmental lawyer. I wouldn't expect him to debate me on environmental law, and I don't see why anyone would think that you would debate him on vaccine science. The whole thing makes no sense.
Okay, so let me wrap this up. I want to show you 4 clips where he's disparaging anti-vaxxers, and then he's slamming Joe Rogan for being a racist, an anti-Semite, and a transphobe.
I'm telling you tonight that I am tired of the incessant debate me bro mantra from conspiracy nuts on social media. But you just can't, in general, debate with conspiracists and loons.
The problem is, he just keeps on moving the goalposts. I mean, first it was the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine that caused autism. What's that?
Moving the goalposts is literally what conspiracy theorists do. News yesterday. No, not for once again spewing racial slurs or spreading anti-Semitic tropes or platforming some infamous transphobe.
The great story here, for anybody willing to find it and write about it and explain it, is this vast right-wing conspiracy that has been conspiring against my husband since the day he announced for president.
You mentioned attacks on the early 90s.
Right.
Do you still believe there's a vast right-wing conspiracy?
Don't you?
I'm asking you.
Yeah. It's gotten even better funded. They brought in some new multi-billionaires to pump the money in. And look, these guys play for keeps. They want to control our country. Senator Sanders and I agree on that completely. They want to rig the economy so they continue to get richer and richer. They could care less about income inequality. They solve their consciences by giving big money to philanthropy and, getting great pictures of them standing in front of whatever charity they donated to. But make no mistake, they want to destroy unions. They want to go after any economic interests that they don't believe they can control.
Just 2 quick points. This is a long video. But they are conspiracy theorists. And I've talked about this before. In movies, TV shows, pretty much any entertainment has some sort of conspiracy theory. You'll see it in even sitcoms. Conspiracy theories are a big part of our society. There's a word for conspiracy because people will conspire. People will, everything about our government, the Constitution was written, and I'm not a big constitutionalist, or, the founding fathers were all Freemasons, which is a conspiracy in itself. But they realized that governments would tend to be corrupt and people would abuse power. There's always people who abuse power. I mean, lots of people do that. And, there's people that you don't think would do it, but then they come into power, and whether it's money power or some other power, and they abuse it. It's very common. And our governmental system was written in a way to try to prevent that as much as possible, but it's happened. Corruption is widespread, and everybody knows it. Like I said earlier, the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, because they're both saying the same thing, we're in dangerous times and our democracy is at risk. Both of the parties are saying this. There's no dispute that the other side is aspiring to conspiring to wreck this country and ruin it and become some sort of totalitarian dictatorship. That's what the Republicans believe and the Democrats believe. So pretty much everybody who's into politics or aware of these things believes in some sort of massive conspiracy. And we have intelligence agencies that's job is to conspire, right? And governmental agencies. So conspiracies are a thing that everybody does, including Hillary Clinton here. And so the way they're disparaging conspiracy theorists, but at the same time saying that they're against racism or prejudiced, when they're, the way they treat us like we're some not even, human beings. And people who are truthers are quite different. And all of us know that. We have different beliefs. We have different ways of going about it. We have different, the way that we act, the way that we think. We have different levels of intelligence, different levels of education. We have, there's just so many differences here that we're not just one group of people. And to disparage everyone like that, based in like an Alex Jones or, some of these other groups that are, represent the worst and call all of us racist or whatever is, again, just an absolute lie, right? And so the whole thing's embarrassing. I don't, this video's gone on long, but they just play themselves. I mean, a 10-minute video I've made into, I did the 25-minute introduction, but there's like an hour and a half of me just mocking and tearing them apart here. I mean, and I could even say more, like it's just that bad. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing to the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.